And an interesting conversation piece has been about Ryan Day. What happens if he wins this game versus Oregon? What happens if he loses this game versus Oregon? I guess your thoughts on the perception of what's going on at Ohio State, Ryan Day. I mean, we saw on College Game Day that even fans were calling for him to be fired, then they go out there and blast Tennessee. I guess, what are your thoughts about this whole Ryan Day thing if he wins or if he loses against Oregon in the second go-around of this matchup this year?
Well, considering the reaction that we saw from Kirk Herbstreit trying to defend Ryan Day and then First Take aggressively coming back at him for getting called out, I think that's just the beginning of how massive this discussion is and can be. It's turned into one of the most compelling conversations because it's the most unique thing that's happened in the sport. I can't think of anything comparable for a head coach to have gone through what Ryan Day has, which is producing really good teams that have been really explosive, athletic, and dominant and recruiting at a high level and playing the way that they did against Tennessee, but not being able to get past Michigan and falling short, not reaching the Big Ten championship game. I think that what we now sit in and where I want to start this conversation, Blake, is what the heck does happen if they lose to Oregon again for a second time? I don't think that there's a world that they get blown out. I don't think that there's a world that they show up and they play really poorly. I don't think anyone should even entertain that. But if they come in here and they lose a close game at the Rose Bowl, does it make sense for him to want to come back? I said this after they lost to Michigan. It feels like he's hit his ceiling at Ohio State. It feels like the pressure of being the head coach at Ohio State is starting to really hit. And fans at Ohio State as well seem to be incredibly impatient with his inability to finish and to get things done in said matchups against Michigan. If they don't win a national title, to me, Blake, and this is why I keep pushing them to win it, they have every capability to do so. I don't know about you, but I just feel like if they can't win that title, they're aggressively falling short of expectations. And I don't know how things improve when they've got a roster like this and they couldn't get the job done.
So here's my thing. And in prep of this, I wanted to just point this out. Ryan Day is 3-3 in big New Year's Six or now playoff bowl games, right? He lost the Fiesta, but he won the Sugar Bowl, lost the national title. He won a Rose Bowl. He lost the Peach Bowl. He lost the Cotton Bowl. But the Peach Bowl was to the national champions. It was one of his only losses. The Cotton Bowl, last year, they lost. But then he wins a first-round playoff game this year. Joe, he's 67-10. So I understand the expectations that are there. I understand what Ohio State fans are wanting to mean. But in reference to what you just said, I want to bring up three things on both sides. Okay, if he loses, it's going to be the same old, same old. He can't win the big game. He's overrated. And then the biggest thing is going to be, well, then what did you spend $20 million on? Because now you're messing with other people's money, right? Like, you spent all this money to go get Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs, and you went and got Will Howard, and you spent all the money through high school recruiting to go and get these guys, and then you're getting back to exactly where you've been finishing, right? Like, everywhere you had been, you've been losing. You're losing to Oregon in these Fiesta Bowls 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So what are we talking about here? But here's the thing that where I think for Ryan Day, whether you like him, love him, or hate him, things are not created equally. What happens if he wins? They're not going to talk about Ryan Day. They're going to say, well, Ohio State, they spent the money, and yeah, they have a national title type team.
Really good point.
It's not, nothing's going to change here for him. But I look at him and say, so wait a minute. He would blow out, okay, Tennessee, and then if he wins, regardless if it's by one, Joe, they're going to be the national title front runner. The odds will come out from BetOnline, FanDuel, DraftKings, whoever. They're going to be the favorite to win the whole damn thing. It doesn't matter who else wins around them because you look at Texas. You look at what they would have moving on from there. And you could arguably make the case that look at who they would have played. Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, then a national title. Joe, that run would be unprecedented. That would be an unprecedented type run for him to go on and win that. I think that I said this last week. I want to emphasize it again. I think they're only scratching the surface for how good they can be offensively. I know they're banged up. I think they could take it to another level. I am not in the camp, nor have I ever really been, instead of him losing games he shouldn't have. I don't think he's overrated. Like, everybody says that, well, Ohio State recruits itself. No, it doesn't. I've seen blue blood programs hire a wrong coach.
Yes.
And it goes flat. Like, what are you talking about? So I think for Ryan Day, he can't win the big one. He's overrated, and you spend all that money. But I don't think even if he wins that people come back to the drawing board on him. He's 67-10. And that's the biggest. I get it. He's lost 10 games. But, Joe, he's lost 2 games every single year since 2021, most of them coming in the playoff. So, look, undefeated seasons are very rare. Saban only did it, what, twice? In 20 years? What are we trying to do here? By the way, his underling, the guy that he molded to do the same exact thing, in the same exact time he's done it once.
Well, I don't think anyone was calling
team and defense to do it.
I don't think anyone was calling for him to go undefeated. It has more to do with them not reaching the Big Ten championship game. Them not okay.
They were in there. Well, no, they weren't in there last year. But yeah, you're right.
But this is the way that I think you depicted that. I think is perfect because, and this is why I was so annoyed by Kirk Herbstreit being so pissy about this and trying to call out the fans for being, so lunatic crazy about the expectations and the media for reacting the way that they did. There's a discussion to be had on both sides. And that's what this has just made it so bizarre to track, and also just from somebody in the media compelling to analyze both sides of the spectrum. For what you just talked about, he's been highly successful. But for the expectation and having just seen Urban Meyer win a national title before him, for them to not have accomplished that, I think is where that frustration from Ohio State fans comes into play. I still believe as long as they get to the national championship game, all of those concerns get quieted. You bring up a very interesting point of, do Ohio State fans and does the national media say and try to move the goalposts and go, well, yeah, they were supposed to get to the national championship game. They were supposed to beat Oregon. They just didn't win the game that mattered the most against Michigan. Is this really Ryan Day, or is it just him having the resources to recruit at a high level and their roster prevailed? There are going to be arguments that say that. Again, it all plays into the insanity of the narrative. But if he does end up getting there, I think that he's not buying himself grace because his buyout's too big for them to fire him. They're not going to move on. They're not going to bring in Vrabel. None of that stuff's going to happen, as much as it would be crazy to see. But I think that
shouldn't do it. That's dumb.
Right. I just think where this comes into play more and who has the most say in what happens, it's not the Ohio State administration. They're not going to just get rid of him for that. It comes down to, what does Ryan Day want to do? Does Ryan Day just feel so burnt out from dealing with all of this crap and all of the negative feedback from fans and the inability to beat Michigan that he thinks that he should test the waters in the NFL, or he should test the waters at another school? Is that how this ends up shaping up? That is what's, the biggest part to track with this. And if they reach a national title, I would think that he's going to feel a little bit better about his situation.
Well, hold on now. I'm going to defend him on this. And this is a hard truth. And here is the hard truth. Jim Tressel got to multiple BCS bowls, got to multiple BCS national titles. He got to 3 of them and lost 2 of them. He's 1-2 in national title games.
Yeah.
Let's go to Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer won 1 national title at Ohio State. How long?
He wasn't there that long. He wasn't there for that long.
8 years? He was there about 8 years.
Let me check. I think you're right.
So, I mean, he won 1. So this is not just a Ryan Day situation here. This isn't just a Ryan Day.
It was 6 years. He was 2012 to 2018.
Okay. So he won 1. Okay. One of the greatest coaches that we've seen. Mm-hmm. Okay. The bottom line, though, is that Ohio State has failed on expectations far before Ryan Day even got there. I remember in 2007 when they got absolutely blasted by LSU. I was there. Spare me. Okay. This has been a problem for them long before Ryan Day even got there.
I wouldn't classify it as a problem, but there is at least. Okay.
It is a problem. Hold on. They've gotten to multiple big time games as a program, and they've lost on national stages outside of Ryan Day. You can't tell me it's not a problem when you're getting to the national stage and losing.
I would just like to reclassify that as it's not as to win a national title is a ridiculously hard feat. There are good teams every single year. The way that you're saying, I agree with what you're saying, that like to assume an Ohio State head coach has to win a national title is extremely ridiculously lofty expectations. But to the point you're making here of Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel, and then John Cooper was the head coach before that for a long period of time. And, you know, Woody Hayes was there for as long as he was. You should at least be able to reach national titles and win one. That's where I think the frustration comes from Ohio State.
He did get to a national title. He just ran in that 2020 Bama team.
Right.
What if he gets to another? I mean, like, there's parts of me that asks, like, this isn't over yet. Like, listen, I know that they hate Michigan. The Ohio State fans hate Michigan. I get it. It's a bit massive rival. I lose to Michigan every year if it means I'm playing for a national title. Sorry.
I didn't realize John Cooper didn't win a national title, by the way. I'm just throwing that out there. And somebody put in the chat here, John Cooper 2.0. I mean, and maybe that's what this is that it ends with a 12-year run.
He's going to win one. I'm going to tell you, I'm bullish on them right now.
I am too. Any Ohio State fans who stumble upon this but didn't listen to our Ohio State preview, I think that they're going to beat Oregon, and which is why I really want to revisit
this
conversation.
Oregon, they're winning a national title.
Yeah, I really want to redo this segment after the Oregon game. Like, I really, this is how entrenched and how deep this is and how complex this is. I can't think of, Blake, a narrative surrounding a head coach that has ever been built like this. Because at the very least, when you've got coaches that have these very deep rivalries, you know, Brian Kelly when he was at Notre Dame or any LSU coach or Alabama coach, they would end up splitting against one another. You know, they would end up having matchups where they would knock each other off, and then winning those games would set them up for national titles. We don't have the inverse of an Ohio State team that was on the trajectory to win a national championship and to get to a national championship game, losing to a Michigan team that had nothing to play for. That's where the whole thing just becomes an S show.
Yeah, listen, to wrap this up for me, they're not going to give Ryan Day his credit.
No, so I don't think so either.
If he beats Tennessee and Oregon, I think that they're going to beat Texas. I think that they'd ultimately be the favorite, and then what? And God forbid he gets to a national title game and he loses to Georgia. What's your point? Like what would be your point at that? Okay, so he went through the hardest way to get there, and they fell up short to a team that we both thought would be in the national title game to start off with. Like, it is what it is. I am not in the camp of fire Ryan Day. I think you're too foolish to think that you should fire him. Who are you going to get? Vrabel?
Well, again, I don't think that – I really don't think that they fire him because his buyout is enormous. This is not a Texas A&M situation where they're going to just be like, screw it, we're going to throw a bunch of oil money at this and he's going to be done. And Jimbo Fisher – getting pushed out the door was a lot different of a circumstance. It was very, very different because of the underperformance of them just straight up not winning games. You need some sort of a valid reason to get rid of them. The only way that this marriage ends, is that if it's a John Calipari type of a circumstance where the frustration kicks in from said coach and he's just like, I can't take this anymore. I need to move on and start fresh. There's a lot of times if you talk to people in coaching that a lot of people believe that like after 10 seasons, eventually it is time to restart. If you can't accomplish what you're trying to accomplish at one school.
You're going to be there longer 10 years because he was a coordinator.
Right. He's been there for a really long time.
Right. We'll see, man. Let's let the season play out here. Okay.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.